The country's largest union joins SAFTU in tomorrow's strike over the proposed national minimum wage. This as the bus strike looks set to continue. Government confident its free higher education model will work. This is eNews at 8. I'm Sally Burdett. Good evening. Brace yourselves. Tomorrow could be a very disruptive day. Not only is the nationwide bus strike likely to enter its second week tomorrow, the country's biggest trade union is planning a strike against the minimum wage proposals. The National Union of Metal Workers is calling on its 340,000 members to join Trade Union Federation SAFTU on the streets in major centres tomorrow. They say the proposed 20 Rand an hour minimum wage is an insult and a slave wage. Reporter Slindelo Masikane has the details.
SAFTU and its affiliates like Numsa will take to the streets in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Polokwane, Port Elizabeth and Bloemfontein to protest against the proposed 20 Rand per hour minimum wage. Workers across the country are also being called on to stay away from work on Wednesday and join the nationwide strike.
The workers have spoken. They died. They were massacred by the ANC government, demanding 12,500. That's what Marikana Matthias died for. We're saying this 20 Rand is nothing less than spitting on their graves.
The strike will also protest against any amendments to the labour law that would impose compulsory balloting before a strike. Guarding the ongoing bus strike, Numsa says workers are resolute in their demands.
We are aware that the Department of Labour is intervening to try and knock sense into employers with an intention to find speedy resolution to the strike.
The organisation has extended an invitation to political parties to join in the demonstrations. Numsa says the working class is under siege and the economy is in shambles under President Cyril Ramaphosa's so-called New Dawn. It says the strike tomorrow is to demand a real living wage. Slindelo Masikane, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, trade union federations FEDUSA and Cosatu, which represent some 3 million workers, is not involved in the march against the minimum wage proposals tomorrow. Also, talks continue this evening to end the deadlock over the bus strike. The Department of Labour has now stepped into those negotiations, and we understand the talks continue this evening. Today, more details emerge on how our government is going to make free higher education work. Minister Naledi Pandor briefed the media in Parliament following what she calls a barrage of questions around the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Now, in December, former President Jacob Zuma announced that students from limited income households would be able to study for free. Leanne Jansen reports that the minister is confident her model is a workable one.
The announcement of free tertiary education for qualifying students has been hailed a victory for the Fees Must Fall movement, following a series of often violent protests for free education for all. 4 months since that announcement, Higher Education and Training Minister Naledi Pandor details what this new funding model entails. She says 4.581 billion Rand has been set aside for qualifying university students and a further 2.585 billion Rand for TVET college students. Pandor and NSFAS leadership say while there are some challenges, the funding model will work.
So the system is absolutely sustainable, provided we continue to obviously make sure that the improvements in efficiencies in the system, provided we can continue to expect other stakeholders to continue to play a role in funding the sector.
Since this is a fledgling initiative, several areas still need to be addressed, including student dropouts.
We are working out in fine-tuning the policy, especially that government has increased funding significantly in this area, working out conditionalities that each student would have to meet over and above those that are there at a bare minimum at the present moment.
There is concern, though, that some student funding for last year still hasn't been paid. Pandor wants NSFAS authorities to deal with this urgently. Leanne Jansen, Parliament.
Staying with news from Parliament, and our ailing national carrier was in the spotlight as well today. South African Airways CEO Vuyani Jagana says SAA is unlikely to be able to repay its debt of 9.2 billion rand. Now, the debt matures in March next year. Annika Larsen reports from Parliament.
SAA CEO Vuyani Jagana and the SAA board appeared before Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and the picture they painted to MPs was depressing. While the airline carrier hopes to have a turnaround strategy in place and break even by 2020, right now it seems that it won't be able to pay its 9.2 billion rand in debt, which matures in March next year, and it's poised for another government bailout. Government is still in talks to try and find an equity partner, but Jagana said that top executives don't want to come from other companies to work at SAA, and its own management team is facing death threats for trying to implement change. MPs appeared frustrated at the SAA board's failure to answer questions on the turnaround strategy. "You think you're frustrated," said the SAA board chair. "Well, so are we." Annika Larsen, Parliament.
Members of Parliament have also agreed to go ahead with an inquiry into how the Gupta family became naturalised citizens. There's been a great deal of confusion over just how and when the controversial family became South African citizens. Lester Kivet has the details.
The Home Affairs Minister Malusi Gigaba, Director General Makuseli Apleni and the Gupta family themselves could all be called to Parliament to explain how the controversial family came to be naturalised South African citizens. Gigaba has on previous occasions clarified that Atul and Rajesh Gupta were naturalised under former Home Affairs Ministers Mangosuthu Buthelezi and Nosiviwe Mapisa Nkakula respectively, but also stressed that brother Ajay Gupta is not a South African citizen. Some committee members also want Northwest Premier Supra Mahumapelo call before Parliament to detail his relationship with the Guptas. The Guptas' business relations and donations to schools in their province are cited as some of the reasons why the family was granted citizenship.
When you deal with the Northwest, you're dealing with a sphere of government. When you deal with the department, you're dealing with the department that is in a sphere of government, and that is the government of the Northwest. Therefore, key individuals become relevant. So therefore, Chair, I'm saying that in our identifying those that we want them to appear before, dealing with the sphere of government, we don't leave the Premier of the province outside the process.
There's also been calls from some MPs that the Gupta passports be revoked until they return to South Africa to answer police questions in various state capture-linked investigations. Lester Kivet, Cape Town.
Well, more trouble for Mahumapelo. The National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union wants the Northwest Premier fired immediately. The union has written to President Cyril Ramaphosa over Supra Mahumapelo. It wants the politician fired over the provincial healthcare deadlock. Public healthcare workers in the Northwest began a strike 2 months ago. Our reporter Erin Bates has the details.
Nahawu is resolute. Its Northwest members will continue to strike over working conditions in public health care. That is, until their list of about 20 demands is met.
The union vows to intensify the current ongoing strike action in Northwest because of the intransigence and the heightened levels of arrogance displayed by the provincial government.
Last week, service delivery protests erupted in the province. This after 2 patients reportedly died at a clinic, allegedly after not receiving help. Protests have turned violent, with looters targeting local shops. Police have arrested dozens of people. But service delivery woes in healthcare predate the strike, says Nahawu's General Secretary.
The communities were affected by these challenges way before the strike, and some of these challenges are the reasons we decided to embark on the strike action.
The Premier also suspended the Provincial Health HOD, Dr. Thabo Lekalakala. This over a 30 million rand payment from Northwest Health to the Gupta-linked company Mediosa. For Nahawu, it's just not enough.
We fully support the call for the Premier to resign, as we believe that the crisis in the Department of Health took place under his nose, and that it is impossible not to be aware of the gross corruption taking place in the department. However, we are opposed to any violence and vandalism of property.
The union has written to President Cyril Ramaphosa over the matter. Yesterday, my colleague Samkele Maseko asked the Premier if he would step down.
ANC has got its own processes of dealing with all its deployments, as I said, from president up to the councillor on the ground. And all of us must respect the democratic centralism of the African National Congress. All of us must humble ourselves before our people, before the African National Congress.
Aaron Bates, Johannesburg.
More news for you after the break. And a 12-year battle against titanium mining on the Wild Coast goes to the High Court in Pretoria as villagers fight for their land. Residents of a coastal village in the Eastern Cape are refusing to give up their fight against a mining company. A group of people from Xolobeni village on the Wild Coast say titanium mining could see hundreds of families displaced. The Amadiba Crisis Committee has approached the North Gauteng High Court to make sure this doesn't happen. Now, they want the court to force the Mineral Resources Minister to get permission from residents before granting mining permits. Malungelo Boy reports.
The fight by villagers of Xolobeni on the Wild Coast against mining has been going on for more than a decade now.
Villagers who rely on agriculture and tourism for survival raised their objections to titanium mining by an Australian company in their community from the very onset.
Over the past 10 years, the proposed mining has divided the Xolobeni village, with community members turning against one another. Those who've been at the forefront trying to preserve their village say they won't stop fighting.
We are not backing off, we are not giving up. It's because the land is our identity. If you hand it over your land, you hand it over your own identity. Now, we're not going to know ourselves who we are, because that land, it feeds us. It feeds our children, it feeds our livestock. Now, if you allow the mining, how are we going to survive? That is why we rather die to allow the mining to take place.
Their lawyers say the villagers' constitutional rights have to be protected.
They're saying that customary law is protected by the Constitution, and that protection is also found in statute law and indeed in international law. South Africa is lagging behind other countries when it comes to protecting customary owners of land.
The Mineral Resources Department had argued that whether the community gives consent or not, the Mineral and Petroleum Act grants the minister the right to issue that license. The judgment has been reserved. Malungelo Boy, Pretoria.
To some positive news on schooling now. The Gauteng Education Department has partnered with the private sector to launch 2 schools that will specialise in nuclear energy education. The department says the project is aimed at promoting interest in maths and science and also develop extra skills while pupils are still young. Our reporter Zikona Chona attended a launch at one of the schools in Pretoria today.
Pupils at Pretoria's Pelindaba Secondary School already have a keen interest in science. The school is one of 2 in Gauteng that have added a nuclear specialization component to their curriculum. The Gauteng Education Department has partnered with the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation to provide the additional learning option.
This is one of the 25 schools that we are launching across the province between this year and next year. You can see this is a school of nuclear. It specializes on all the careers within nuclear, the technology part of it. You know, nuclear that I'm talking about here is nuclear that will allow you to have your Colgate or your toothpaste every morning. It's a nuclear that will allow you to drive your car every day.
Numsa will conduct regular exchange programs with teachers at the school and will send its own experts into the classrooms to share their specialized knowledge. Pupils at the school are already excited about the prospects the specialization will offer them. Some are already considering career changes.
After Panyaza's inspired me, I changed. I wanted to be a pilot. So, I'm going to follow my dream.
We are so happy that there is going to be a change in our school and there is going to be a change. It's going to change the world.
Gauteng Education says it's in talks with the Higher Education Department to ensure the school's curriculum introduced is in line with what's taught at universities. Zikhona Tshona, Atteridgeville in Pretoria.
Recapping your top stories this evening, the country's largest union joins SAFTU in tomorrow's strike over the proposed national minimum wage. This is the bus strike looks set to continue as well. Government is confident its free higher education model will work.
Good evening and welcome to the Weather Centre this Tuesday night. It's a clear night across South Africa except for cloudy weather along the Wild Coast where we can expect a bit of light rain as well. That will clear rapidly after sunrise tomorrow with strong winds likely ahead of an approaching cold front for the western parts of South Africa. This cold front makes landfall along the west coast tomorrow evening, bringing rain to the western parts once again, while it remains dry over the rest of South Africa. As far as temperatures are concerned, we're forecasting fairly low temperatures for the western parts tomorrow, a high of 18 degrees in Springbok, 20 for Sutherland, but hot and windy conditions likely over the eastern parts of the Northern Cape. In the Western Cape, rain only for the evening hours in the southwest, but it's going to be hot, dry and windy in Beaufort West and Oudtshoorn. The Eastern Cape with a similar forecast, partly cloudy conditions later on, mid-20s for the coastal areas and low temperatures overnight on the high ground. 30 degrees in Newcastle tomorrow with clear, dry weather, the coastline becoming partly cloudy, maximums of 27 in Durban. A very hot day ahead for the Lowveld in Mpumalanga, and it will be cold at first on the Highveld with pleasant daytime temperatures. The same goes for Limpopo with a low of 13 degrees in Polokwane, 29 in the afternoon, hot weather likely in the western Bushveld as well. Northwest remains hot and dry. We're expecting a cold start to the day in the eastern part with a low of 6 degrees in Potchefstroom. Single-digit minimum temperatures for the Free State as well, 5 degrees overnight in Zastron, but pleasant daytime temperatures. And in Gauteng, it will be cold over the southern parts with a low of 6 in Vereniging, but pleasant daytime highs. Let's take a look at Thursday's forecast. Rainy weather and cold conditions spread further inland, while it remains hot and dry over eastern South Africa, and by Friday there's a possibility of rain along the south coast in KZN. That's all from the Weather Centre. Enjoy your evening.
And finally, it seemed like an ordinary domestic flight from Durban to Johannesburg on Monday. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa was on board. That's pretty special. And then this happened. That's praise singer Lutendo Mugagadeli. It has always been his dream to meet Cyril Ramaphosa and become his official poet. President looking quite chuffed there. Mugagadeli, known as Vendor Boy Poet, says it would be an honour to serve the president. The carrier made the first-time flyer's dream come true. Well, let's recap your top stories this evening. The country's largest union, Numsa, joins SAFTU in tomorrow's strike over the proposed national minimum wage. This as the bus strike looks set to continue tomorrow as well. Government is confident its free higher education model will work. And that's your news. Take care. Good night.